Hello, I am Dyslexo Boy. In this series, I'm going to be talking about practical advice on how to overcome dyslexia and ADHD while studying in medical school. In this video, I'll be talking about reasonable adjustments and how to use them. This is something I believe to be particularly important because universities are very eager to provide reasonable adjustments, but they rarely have useful advice on how to best utilize them. I consider reasonable adjustments to be akin to a prosthetic, and the things I'm going to suggest in this video are akin to physiotherapy, required to get the most out of your support. The first reasonable adjustment we're going to talk about is the most well known, having extra time to complete the exam. This is useful to combat the slow reading speed in dyslexia. The standard is about 25% extra, so a 90-minute exam would last about 112 minutes. When I was younger, I was told that this time was to go back and make sure that I had spelled all of my answers correctly. This is extraordinarily bad advice. Do not do this. You're never going to be able to spell correctly, so you're wasting the extra time that has been provided. In reality, this time should be used to compensate for your slow reading speed. It allows you to move through each question just a little bit slower, making sure that you've understood what is being asked, and rereading it if necessary. I read at my own pace now and consistently finish all the questions at the adjusted end time. The second reasonable adjustment is having a personal reader for the exam. This is someone who can read the question to you, but they only repeat the text verbatim and they cannot offer any interpretation or analysis of what's been said. Even so, it's useful because it's easier to interpret information via auditory input rather than from text. I should say I've never received this despite it being on my list of adjustments. I know students have had it, but they've always been outside of the UK, and some people have had text-to-voice programs rather than a person to help them. Instead, I've taken to reading the question aloud, or if I'm around other people in an exam hall, miming the words with my mouth. This forces me to take longer to read the question. I can detect if I've missed any words because the sentences sound strange, and it forces me to consider what I'm being asked as I speak. The third reasonable adjustment is using highlighters during exams, as a lot of standardized tests only allow students to use a pencil to fill in their answers. I've spoken before about how difficult it can be to retain information in your short-term memory. It's a struggle to pull information out of the text without rereading it multiple times. Highlighters allow you to keep track of key information, such as vital signs or symptoms, in a large question stem. Looking for words to highlight also forces you to engage with the text rather than falling into the trap of simply glancing over it and then missing out key information points. Most computer programs used for exams have a function to allow highlighting, so don't forget to check with the invigilators that it's switched on and that you know how to use it. The fourth reasonable adjustment is the use of a small private room rather than being included in the large exam hall. This is ideal for overcoming the distractions of noise and becoming overwhelmed, which can happen easily with dyslexia and ADHD. I've never had a room completely to myself. Usually I'm put in a smaller group of 2 or 3 people who have similar reasonable adjustments, but it's still a vast improvement on being placed in the larger group. If it's still a problem, then you can get additional adjustments allowing for the use of earplugs to completely eliminate noise. The fifth reasonable adjustment is the use of a computer. This is essential for essay-style questions where the use of a computer is not already standard, as poor handwriting and lack of a spell check function can really impede your ability to communicate. You should learn to touch type in order to get the most out of the device. It's a tedious skill to learn, but if you haven't already, it's invaluable in the advancing digital age. The sixth reasonable adjustment is the use of scrap paper and a pen. This can counteract the poor short-term memory seen in dyslexia. You can keep a note of any extraneous information rather than trying to hold on to it. I primarily use it for things like equations, Punnett squares, or figuring out mathematical equations. I've said mathematical equations there twice. However, another useful consequence is that you can make a timetable for the exam. This lets you track how many questions you should have completed and at what time. So if there's a 90 questions on a 112-minute exam, I should have done 25 by 30 minutes, 50 by 60 minutes, and 75 by 90 minutes, and the full 90 by 112 minutes. It's very rewarding to be able to tick off chunks of questions on time and can be a really positive boost to your morale in the long term. Make sure you aren't denied this adjustment if the exam is mostly being done on a computer. The seventh reasonable adjustment is the ability to stop the clock and take rest breaks. This is useful to make sure you're maintaining your concentration if you have difficulty with things like ADHD, especially during very long exams. Usually you receive about 25% of the total exam in stoppage time, and I add this to my timetable. So I take a 5-minute break every 30 minutes after completing 25 questions. You'll notice that this timetable is very similar to how I revise, as I talked about in my previous videos, which is useful because the conditioning will help you to relax when you're in the exam setting. I take the time to go to the toilet as I drink quite a lot and I stay hydrated to the exams. This act also allows me to get up, stretch my legs, and focus on something other than answering questions. It's also useful to be able to splash water on my face and stop myself from panicking. In summary, use your extra time to read the questions at your own pace, preferably out loud, while using highlighters to engage with the text. Ask to be placed in a small side room to avoid distractions. Use a computer to mitigate poor handwriting or spelling, but make sure you have scrap paper nearby to make paper notes. Make a timetable for your exam to ensure you're making good progress and keeping to time, and schedule your rest breaks regularly to make sure that your attention is kept up. There are other adjustments you can get which I haven't listed here, as they're not part of my personal plan. These include things like fidget devices in the exam, or having food so you don't get distracted by hunger. I'm hoping to conduct some interviews with other students who also have dyslexia, where they will be able to elaborate on their adjustments in the future, as I don't feel I have the ability to go through them all myself. In my next video, we'll be talking about how to cope with essay style questions and OSCEs. Thank you for your time.